The memory of that night still makes my heart race. It was like a scene from a movie, something I never thought would happen, especially with my stepmom. I can't stop thinking about it, replaying it over and over in my head. I just want to feel that excitement again. It all started when I was 10. My mom, my real mom, left. She just vanished, took off with another guy. It was so sudden, so confusing. One day she was there, the next she was gone. She didn't even say goodbye. I felt lost, hurt, and confused. I wondered if she ever thought about me, if she missed me. It took a long time to heal, to accept that she was gone. Not long after, my dad met Priscilla. She became my stepmom. At first it felt weird. My mom had just left, and here was this new woman stepping into her shoes. She seemed nice enough, but I didn't trust her right away. It felt like an intrusion, like she was trying to replace my mom. When I was 12, my dad married Priscilla. She officially became part of the family. It all happened so fast. I wondered if my dad had been seeing her before my mom left. Maybe my parents had been unhappy for a long time, and I just hadn't noticed. Part of me wanted to know the truth, but another part of me didn't want to dig too deep into the past. Priscilla is about 5'5", with brown hair streaked with blonde highlights. Her hair always looks perfect, like she just walked out of a salon. She's really fit, and I've heard people mention her measurements, 36, 24, 32, though I never fully understood what that meant. All I know is that she's in great shape and seems to spend a lot of time taking care of herself. She recently had surgery to make a few changes, but even before that, I always wondered how she managed to look so good, especially at her age. Her skin has a slight tan, giving her the appearance of someone who spends a lot of time outdoors. What's even more surprising is that she's 53 years old. You'd never guess her age by looking at her. She doesn't resemble the other moms I know. She always dresses in stylish clothes that highlight her figure, and she's very confident about her appearance. People often compliment her, and it makes me wonder how she stays looking so young. Is it the surgery, or does she have some secret? Even though she looks amazing, what really shocked me was what happened next. It was a Friday night, and my dad, stepmom, and I were home together. We were all sitting on the couch, watching a football game my dad had recorded on the DVR. The game was pretty exciting, and I was enjoying the time with them. The phone rang, shattering the comfortable silence of the living room. My dad jumped up to answer it. "Okay, I'll be right there," he said, his voice sounding a little disappointed. I could tell he didn't want to leave, but it was work. When your boss calls, you have to go even if it's late at night. I didn't like it when my dad had to leave, but I understood. His job was important, and he always reminded me that sometimes you have to do things you don't want to. I'd gotten used to it by now. My dad was always prepared to help out at work, even if it meant leaving during fun times, like watching a game. This wasn't the first time, and I knew it wouldn't be the last. My dad returned to the living room and told us he had to go to work because there was a major computer virus at his company. My dad works as a computer engineer for a well-known company in our city, so when something big like this happens, he has to fix it right away. I wasn't surprised, but I did feel a little sad that he had to leave again. My stepmom and I said goodbye to him. She gave him a quick kiss on the lips, and then he hurried out the door. After he left, she came back to the couch, but instead of sitting in her usual spot, she sat right next to me. I wasn't expecting that, but I didn't think much of it at first. We continued watching TV, but it felt a little different with her sitting so close. Every now and then, I could feel her arm brushing against mine. Normally, we each had our own space, but now it seemed like she wanted to sit near me. I didn't say anything because I didn't want to be rude, but it did feel a bit strange. As the show continued, I tried to focus on what was happening on the screen, but my mind kept wandering back to why she had moved closer. It felt a little awkward, but I convinced myself it was nothing and kept watching. The room was quiet, except for the sound of the TV in the background. I'd never really thought about my stepmom in any unusual way before. She was just my dad's wife, and that was it. But for some reason, while we were sitting there watching the game, something changed. My body started reacting, and I became hard. I didn't understand why, but I was glad my jeans and long shirt covered it so she wouldn't notice. I did my best to ignore it and focus on the game. "Hey, Reed, would you like a beer?" she asked. Her voice was casual, but with a subtle hint of something else. I glanced at her, surprised by the offer. But I'm not 21 yet," I responded, trying to remind her of the obvious. She smiled, clearly unfazed by that detail. "You need to get used to the taste," she replied, already getting up. "I'll grab one for both of us." I wasn't sure how to feel about it, but something in her tone suggested she wasn't going to accept a no. I sat there, staring at the TV, but I could no longer focus on the game. My mind raced, trying to figure out why she was so eager for me to drink. Was she just being friendly, or was there something else going on? My thoughts swirled, but I couldn't come up with a good reason to refuse, so I shrugged it off and decided to go along with it. Maybe I was overanalyzing things. She stood up from the couch, and as she walked toward the kitchen, I couldn't help but notice the way her hips swayed. They moved in a steady rhythm, and for some reason, it made my body react even more. She was wearing tight jeans and a yellow top, which made everything stand out more. I tried to focus on the TV, but my eyes kept drifting back to her. When she reached the fridge, she opened the door and looked inside. The beers were on the bottom shelf, so she had to bend down to get them. But instead of bending her knees, she bent over at the waist. This made her behind stick out even more, directly in my line of sight. My face grew hot, and I quickly looked away, hoping she wouldn't catch me staring as she grabbed the beers. I tried to calm myself down. I knew I shouldn't be thinking this way, and I didn't want to view her like that. But it was hard to ignore the feelings bubbling up inside me. I shifted uncomfortably in my seat, trying to adjust my jeans so she wouldn't notice how my body was reacting. I kept telling myself to stop thinking about it, but it was easier said than done. "Do you want a light or dark beer?" she called out, her hips still swaying slightly as she stood near the fridge. I tried to keep my focus on the TV, but my body just kept responding, almost like I couldn't control it. I'll take a light one," I said, my voice sounding a bit higher than usual. I was nervous and didn't want her to notice my heart was pounding. I couldn't shake the strange feeling building inside me. She walked back toward me, her hips swaying with every step, and I couldn't help but notice how close she sat this time. She handed me the beer, and I quickly grabbed it, trying not to make things awkward. Taking a deep breath, I opened the beer with a small pop, feeling relieved that I didn't mess it up. It was a simple task, but I was just happy nothing embarrassing happened. "Oh, aren't you strong? Can you open mine too?" she asked, holding out her beer to me. I nodded and opened it for her, but as I passed it back, she fumbled with it. And before I knew it, beer spilled all over my pants. "Oh no, I'm so sorry, Reed," she said, looking genuinely concerned. "Here, let's take off your shirt so it doesn't get wet, and I'll grab a towel." I sat there for a moment, unsure of what to do. My pants were soaked, and now she wanted to help clean up. After a brief hesitation, I decided to take off my shirt like she suggested. She quickly left to get a towel, and I was left sitting there in my wet jeans, feeling embarrassed and unsure of what would happen next. She returned and gently pulled my shirt off, and I went along with it, trying not to think too much about the obvious lump in my jeans as she hurried off to fetch the towel. I noticed how quickly she moved, almost jogging. Her chest bounced with each step, and though I tried to look away, it was hard not to notice. When she came back, towel in hand, she knelt in front of me. My heart raced as she began to pat down my pants with the towel, but what made me even more anxious was that she was drying the exact area where the lump was. I tried to stay calm, but each touch made me more nervous. Then she paused for a moment, her hand resting right over the lump. My heart skipped a beat, and I had no idea what to say or do. It was as if she realized what was happening, but neither of us spoke. I sat there, frozen, hoping she wouldn't make the situation more uncomfortable, but the silence between us only made everything feel more intense. After a few moments, she broke the silence. "Pat, what is that?" she asked, her eyes wide with surprise. I could barely breathe as I stammered, I don't know." My heart was pounding, and it felt like I was in some sort of dream where everything was happening too quickly. I wanted to tell her it was nothing, but I was too scared to say anything. "Well, if you don't know, I'll have to find out for myself," she exclaimed with excitement. In an instant, she unbuttoned my pants, revealing the hard package. I had been dreading her gasp echoing in the room, and I felt my face flush red. I began to panic, my words stumbling out as I tried to figure out what to do next. "Oh, wow, Reed," she said, still astonished, as she reached out and ran her hand along the length of my, well, I felt a whirlwind of emotions, embarrassment, shock, and disbelief. It was like I was watching everything unfold in slow motion, and I couldn't believe what was happening. "It's so big, Reed," she said with excitement. "I need this now." I was at a loss for words, unsure of how to respond. She gently pushed me back and sat on my legs, giving me a playful smile. Before I knew it, she leaned forward and began to take my package into her mouth. My eyes widened in surprise. Seeing her do this was something I had never expected, and it felt overwhelming. Her head moved up and down, and I could feel her saliva making everything wetter, intensifying the sensations. Watching her, I felt a rush of excitement. Her movements were so smooth, and it seemed like she was genuinely enjoying herself. As I sat there, I was filled with a mixture of awe and nervousness, unsure of what to think or do next. Suddenly, I grabbed her hair, which was just past her shoulders, and pulled it toward me. I couldn't believe what I had done. She continued to focus on my package for about 7 minutes, and I was astonished by her concentration. After what felt like a long time, she finally took one big bite and swallowed my package whole. At that moment, something surprising happened. It released a large amount of fluid, and I gasped in shock. She held my package there for a few moments, and I could see her expression change, as if she was processing the taste and the feeling of what had just occurred. Then she lifted her head, and I noticed a small amount of the white liquid from my package dripping from the corner of her mouth. The phone rang, cutting through the awkward silence. "Hello. Oh, hi, honey. Yes, everything's fine. Oh, okay. See you soon." She quickly rushed over to the couch and said, "Reed, put your clothes on right now. Your father will be here in 2 minutes." Thankfully, the TV was still on, so we both sat down on opposite couches to wait. Just as she had said, my dad walked in and immediately asked, "Why are there beers on the table?" My heart started pounding as I realized the mistake I had made. Before I could say anything, Priscilla jumped in. "Oh, don't worry, honey. I only gave him a small sip from my second one. He's not drunk at all." "All right, that's fine. He can have a beer next time. Just don't drink too much, okay?" my dad said with a nod. "Okay, Dad," I replied, relieved that he wasn't angry. "Were you two bored while I was gone?" he asked. I quickly shook my head, responding, "Oh no, Dad, definitely not." The game was great. A wave of relief washed over me as we all relaxed again. But as I sat there, I couldn't help but look at my dad. He had no idea what had happened while he was out, and that made me feel even worse. Every time he spoke to me, my nerves spiked, worried that he might somehow figure it out. My heart kept racing, and I hoped with everything I had that he wouldn't become suspicious. I knew that if he asked too many questions or talked to me more, he'd probably start to sense that something was off. Did I feel ashamed? Absolutely. The guilt weighed heavily on me, and it was hard not to feel terrible about what had happened. How could I do this? It wasn't just with anyone. It was with someone my dad deeply cared about. The guilt felt like a massive burden on my shoulders, and I couldn't shake the feeling that I had betrayed him in the worst way. I had crossed a boundary, and there was no way to undo it. The hardest part was knowing that I had done it with the person he loved the most, which made everything feel even more wrong. My dad trusted both of us, and we had broken that trust. It was like I was carrying a secret too big to hold, but I couldn't tell anyone. The thought of what I had done kept swirling around in my head, and I didn't know how I would ever be able to look my dad in the eye again without feeling a deep sense of guilt. I saw Priscilla smile at me, and even though everything seemed normal on the surface, deep down I knew it wasn't. That smile only made me feel more conflicted, because while she seemed okay with what had happened, I certainly wasn't. It was odd, like we both understood what had transpired, but no one was going to bring it up. That moment stuck with me, and I had the feeling it always would. Her smile wasn't just any smile. It was a reminder of everything that had unfolded that day. Even though I tried to push the memory away, I knew I would never forget what had happened. It was one of those moments you wish you could erase, but no matter how hard you try, it lingers. Every time I thought about it, it felt like it had just occurred. I couldn't help but replay the entire event in my mind over and over, and it was like my brain wouldn't let me move on, even though I desperately wanted to. That day became something I knew I would carry with me forever.